Wick Academy 2, Devonvale 2. A fair result then?
I think over the piece, I'd probably have to say aye, but I mean both teams had enough chances. I mean even the sort of last 5-6 minutes, you know, Wick had it 2-2, Wick had that one off the post, Matthew Peterman has that chance at the end, Alan Hughes clears for Vale. So I mean either team could have won it. I think on the balance of things, and it probably reflects in the interviews there, if you're Wick you're probably slightly happier because at 2-0 down at half time it looked a long way back. I mean it's the old cliche, but the next goal in the second half was always going to be pivotal, and that sort of proved to be the case because if Devonvale got it I think it was very much game over. And as Craig touched on, I mean I thought Michael Watson had a really good game, scored the first goal, played a big part in the second, which was an excellent move, but he'll be disappointed with that chance just after he scored, which he puts wide. And if that had gone in and Vale were potentially 3 up at half time, I'd agree with Craig and I would say it was probably game over.
But Gary Manson will be pleased in one aspect, given they'd lost so heavily in the opening weekend of the season at 2-0 down at half time. He must have been fearing the worst.
Well, the thing as well for Wick is the number of new signings that were in a competitive, quite a lot of them didn't play last week, and it was the first game that they were sort of playing together on Saturday. I mean, you'd across the back four, you'd Owen Rendell, Rob McLean, Owen Harold, then you'd Gary Poulin in the middle of the park, and the front three, Ross Gunn and Kyle Henderson. Well, Mark McGregor's come back again this season, but and he was there at the tail end of last season. But Ross Gunn and Kyle Henderson, new signings as well. So you know it's a pretty new team, and I thought there were encouraging signs for them, other than the second goal where they were maybe caught out a wee bit. I thought the two centre halves, Rob McLean and Owen Harold, looked quite good as a partnership, and Ross Gunn, as you'd expect, was sort of lively and energetic throughout. Scored the first goal, and Kyle Henderson, when he was on, his delivery, particularly for corners on the right side, his delivery whipping him right in and causing problems, I thought was excellent. So those were all good signs for Wick. The negatives, I suppose, probably a wee bit unhappy with the second goal. The first goal, I mean, won't need me to say Graham Williamson won't want to see that again. Very uncharacteristic error, and I think the thing was, I mean, Harry Noble, it's on target, so give him credit, but I think almost, you know, it's pretty routine, and I think probably all the Wick players were thinking, well, Graham will catch that, no point in following in, and then he doesn't, and Michael Watson did the rest. But, I mean, what I've said there, good points and bad points, and again for Devonvale, I mean, I thought Mikey Watson, when he was on, was very good. Matthew Peterman on the right side had a good game, looked creative, put a number of good balls into the box. Cammy Angus, his first goal for him in the Highland League, and he worked very hard and he gets into good positions, and obviously keep speaking about it, and I'll try not to, but Dane Ballard being missing, there's an opportunity for somebody, and I think on the basis of Saturday, Cameron Angus will do a pretty good job of trying to fill that void. I mean, though, for Devonvale with negatives, maybe not putting the game to bed, but also I thought and Craig touched on it as well in his interview, I thought throughout set pieces, and especially Kyle Henderson's corners, there always looked a wee bit of vulnerability, and that's something they'll probably be disappointed with. But I mean, they've taken 4 points out of 6 from the first 2 games, so it's not like it's been a bad start for them, really.
I mean, they were 17th last season in the Vale. Are we seeing enough to suggest they're going to be able to push on a bit this season, you think?
I think on the evidence, I mean, it's early doors, but in the evidence I've seen, I think I would say yes, because I mean, there seems to be a bit more steel to them, a bit of a harder edge to them, I would say. I mean, even Craig said it as well in the past, once it went 2-2, and they were rocking a wee bit, they might have lost that game in the past. They've picked up a point. I think there is just that wee bit extra to them. Scott Thompson as well, coming in the middle of the park, I think is a good signing also. So I think if you're a Devon Vale supporter, you'd be, optimistic about what you can do this season.
Rothes 0, Brora Rangers 1. I'm getting a feeling of deja vu here. Andy McGray with the only goal of the game for the second week running.
Aye, that's 2 in the bounce, and both of them good finishes, poachers' goals to an extent. Andy McRae, he offers a lot more than that, but round about the box he certainly comes alive, and I thought he was sort of, just the way he took that goal, just sharp, good forward play really, and what you'd expect for Andy. And he's obviously further good news for Brora as he signed an extension till the summer of 2026, so all being well he'll be banging in goals like that for a few more years to come. But I think Brora overall you'd be pretty satisfied. In terms of a start, they've won 2 tricky away fixtures, probably without yet hitting the heights they can hit, but they've kept 2 clean sheets, and therefore one of their key forward players has done his job, and they've got 2 wins, so you can't really ask for a lot more than that.
Their goalkeeper, Joe Mallon, a big reason for them keeping that second clean sheet with his late save from Fraser Robertson as well.
Aye, well, he had a couple of good saves, as we saw in the highlights, but the one for Fraser Robertson's probably the pick of them. But he's just, he's had various issues with his knee and things in recent years, but when he's available, Joe Mallon's absolutely top class. There's no getting away from that, and he's proved it time and time again, and that save for Fraser Robertson's just another example of it. It's again the old sort of cliche about a good keeper can win you however many points in a season. Well, over his 10 years at Brora, Joe Mallon must have won them some amount of points. But from a Rothes perspective, I think in terms of a performance, a lot more encouraging than last week against Huntly, when they were well beaten, got a bit of a run around perhaps. So I think they'd be happier, and they obviously haven't given up as many chances and things, and also they looked a bit more imposing in the final third. They did work the goalkeeper, they got into some good areas. So although it's a defeat again, it was more like what you'd expect for the Spaysiders.
Looking at the other results, I suppose we'll have to start it at Harlaw Park. An incredible scoreline: Inverurie Locos 0, Fraserburgh 7.
It's just a demolition job, really. There's no there's no shame or disgrace or any word you want to lose in losing a game, and especially to Fraserburgh. And I think, given their respective starts before the game, Fraserburgh you would have had Fraserburgh down as favourites, but the manner of the defeats what will concern Andy Lowe and everyone connected with Inverurie Locos, because it's a hammering really. There's no getting away from that. They were 3-0 down after 11 or 12 minutes, and that, as a contest, the game's over then. And Fraserburgh's if not the worst, they're one of the worst teams to be playing if you're having an off day, because if they sense any sort of weakness or that, they're just relentless, and they keep going and keep attacking and causing you problems, and that's what they've done. And a few of their forwards, they'll be pleased. Sean Butcher's 5 in 2 games, Scott Barber's off the mark, Sargent's off the mark, Connor Wood came on and scored twice, so they'll be happy, and all credit to the Broch. A thoroughly impressive performance, and I know it's only the second week, but they've kind of set a standard there. Mark Cowie last week was unhappy with that they were slow out of the blocks in the first half, and that will certainly couldn't accuse his players of that this week, that's for sure. Going back to Inverurie, it's hard to put your finger on what the issue is, because they had the likes of Nathan Mears, Mark Suter, Johnny Smith missing on Saturday, but you still looked at the team that started. Andy Reid's in goal, Greg Mitchell, Callum Dingwall, Jamie Mickey, Gary Wood, Logan Johnston, Sam Robertson, Lloyd Robertson, Dem Eunice. lot of good players in that team. That looks, on paper, it looked a side that was capable of competing, and obviously they've come up well short. I mean, since then they've signed Paul Coutts, which on paper looks a really good signing if you just look at his record. I mean, nearly 500 games across the English Championship, League One, League Two, with Peterborough, Preston, Derby, Sheffield United, Fleetwood, Salford, Bristol Rovers, 4 promotions in there. He's a top performer, a winner. I mean, if you go right back, won the Highland League with Cove 15 years ago and was Player of the Year before he went down to England. So he's somebody perhaps that can come in and help change things. And I mean, Andy Lowe said after Saturday's game that he's looking to make big changes. Well, I'd imagine Paul Coutts will be a big part of his future plans, because he's clearly, his record shows he's a top-class operator.
You mentioned a lightning start. That certainly was the case at Spain Park. Bankside beating Nairn County 3-0 and 1-0 up after, what, 15 seconds?
Something like that, yeah. And I mean, it really, for both teams, I think that first 20 seconds set the tone for the whole afternoon. Bankside were sharp, they were aggressive, they looked good, they were on the front foot, they looked good going forward. Nairn, from what I've heard and seen, were slack, a bit passive. I mean, Stephen Mackay said it was night and day in terms of the performance from last week against Brora, and was really disappointed. I mean, they did have a few important players missing, but he said that's not an excuse. And I mean, losing the goal so early, and he described it as a gift, probably sums up their afternoon really. And then you go to towards the end of the game, and Chris Antionazzi's goal, the third goal for Bankside,
Some finish.
And tremendous finish. I mean, Josh Winton said it after the game, and I would agree with him totally, that it dropped to the right player in their team in terms of Chris is someone with the quality to produce a finish like that. But again, from an Nairn point of view, it's a goal that you would say, as good as the finish is, it's a goal that you would say is avoidable. But I think the first goal and the last goal probably summed up how things went for Nairn on Saturday. But again, if you look back to Bankside, 2 home games to start, 2 clean sheets, 2 wins, just what they were looking for.
Buckie Thistle 4, Turriff United 0, a Kyle MacLeod double, and further strikes from Andy McCaskill and Sam Pugh. It's business as usual up at Victoria Park, isn't it?
Well, I think it's business a lot more like they were looking for again, because they were a bit unconvincing last week against Clach. Graham Stewart was critical afterwards. I saw them last midweek against Dundee B in the Challenge Cup, and it was probably as poor a Buckie performance as you'll see for a long time. I mean, in terms of actually in sort of parts of the game they did well, but in both boxes, defensively and offensively, they were poor. And Saturday seems to be much more like it. The clean sheet will be welcome. They've scored 4 goals, 2 wins for 2. Job done really. For Turriff, a couple of maybe important players were missing for them. Andy Watt and Max Foster. Neil Gold was also absent. So, I mean, even without those players, I thought it was still a pretty strong Turriff side. But clearly it's maybe, when likes of Buckie, those sort of sides play well, there's maybe still a wee bit of a gap for Turriff to try and bridge.
Huntly 2, Brechin City 2. The champions drop 2 points, but I don't know if that's such a big surprise, because I don't think they've really enjoyed playing Huntly from what we've seen so far.
Yeah, well, I mean, last season, Huntly got a draw at Glebe Park, and then it took a goal in injury time to beat them at Christie Park. And I think this season, Huntly, again, very early to, like I was saying with Devon Vale, very early to make judgments, but on the evidence we've seen so far, they look like they've the scope to improve again. And I think the impressive thing perhaps is they were 2-0 down now. Since Brechin have been in the Highland League, it's not very often, if ever, that we've seen them
let a 2-goal lead
once
slip,
they've gotten, I mean, 1-goal lead, anything can happen, but usually once they get 2 in front, they're able to sort of take a grip of the game and they don't let you back in. But Huntly found a way to get back in. By all accounts, Michael Dangana's finish for the first goal was excellent, and then he's 2 for 2 and to start the season, and Brodie Allen scored one and scored the penalty for the equaliser, and he's also 2 for 2. So I think that's where you have to say credit to Huntly for that, finding a way to come back, and very impressive for them. I mean, Brechin perhaps slightly concerned in the fact that something similar happened in the Challenge Cup last midweek as well. They were 2-0 up against Hearts B and ended up being pegged back and then won through on penalty. So that'll annoy Andy Kirk. I mean, you can't sit here and go, oh, that could be a problem for them. It's the second week of the season, so 2 points being spilled is not a massive issue. It'll just be the manner that'll frustrate them, really, given that they were 2 in front.
Lossiemouth 0, Forest Mechanics 3. Cans on maximum points after the first 2 weekends.
Mm-hmm. I think, I mean, if you go on last season's table and things, it's 2 games to start that Forest would have been hoping to win both of them, but playing sides that were below them last season, but you've still got to go out and do the job, and they did that. And I mean, it looked like it was going to be quite tight again. It was 0-0 for a long time, but Forest, once they got in front, they've gone on and won quite nicely. For Lossie, Frank McGettrick said not keeping the ball or using the ball well enough when they had it, and then a couple of times when they had chances in the final third, they didn't take them. I think Fraser Forbes particularly had one with 15 minutes to go at 2-0 that he couldn't take, and if that goes in, it's maybe a different game. It sort of swings back to pressure being on Forest. But I mean, good stuff from the Cans to start, and Lossie still searching for that first point.
For Martin United 4, Strathspey Thistle 0. A good response from Stuart Anderson's side to their defeat at Brechin on the opener.
Just what for Martin we're looking for. I mean, we saw them last week against Brechin. They were beaten on penalties by Hibs in the Challenge Cup, so they were just looking for that win, really. They'd 5 players missing, but it wasn't a problem. And I mean, Julian Wade off the mark again for the season. I'm sure there'll be plenty more, and Adam Emsley as well, scored on loan for Aberdeen, scored one, set up a couple. He looks quite a good prospect for the months ahead as well.
And the final game, Keith 1, Clachnacudden 1. I think both managers kind of felt this was perhaps the right outcome.
I think, well, going by what they said, I think Jordan McDonald was maybe more disappointed not to win it. He seemed to think his side were perhaps created the better openings or were more in the ascendancy. But Keith, as Craig Ewan said, they were ahead and disappointing. They conceded a penalty, and it sort of came from them giving possession away and letting Clark up the park. So I can understand why neither manager would be entirely happy, but by the same token, a point on the board's maybe not a bad result for either. Both had a couple of debutants as well. Keith had Jordan Cooper, who signed for Turriff at the end of last week, and then Clark had Zach McPhee, who's on loan for Ross County, so there may be a couple to watch out for as well going forward.